try to make a video today. Haven't made a video, I don't think, since this fall. Of course, deer season took some of that time away, and I didn't shoot a buck this year. I passed up on one pretty good 7-point. The buck I was after never showed up, so I'm just out here on the farm today. We've got some rain. I think you can probably see that it's wet back here behind me. It's been raining pretty good today, and that's a good thing. About 8 miles to the north up here is where that Highway 82 fire started. Fortunately for us, it went north about 12 miles, but had the winds been out of the north, we would have probably been in trouble down here. But we did get an inch of rain last week, and today we've probably gotten an inch of rain. The last week's rain kind of slowed the fire down and let the firefighters get ahead of it. Today's rain hopefully puts out all of the remaining smoldering just vegetation and moss and debris that's built up over time. These stump holes from these pines can also burn for a long time, but hopefully this rain has put it out. We're just doing some routine maintenance around the farm. For those of you guys that normally tune into the channel for whitetail content, specifically the mapping type stuff, you know, my apologies for not making a video. I feel like when I make a video, I've got something really good to talk about. I'm not going to make any excuses here. I've had some, you know, medical issues. Had my freaking colon removed, and I still have a big 6x6 bandage on myself. But diverticulitis was a real thing for my dad. It is a real thing for my brother, and it was a real thing for me. But I got the voluntary surgery that I basically qualified for because I just kept getting diverticulitis, and I didn't want my colon to rupture and then, you know, have a colostomy bag for like 6 months. But I'm gonna try to talk about some whitetail stuff today. I just wanted to show you that we picked up a nice excavator for the farm. This is the 24-inch bucket. I've been working this morning mowing some brush. As you can see, this tree line out here and right over here, that's typical for how brush grows around here. I also got this really beefy rake. This has got to be 36 inches. I mean, it's, you know, long as my leg. And we got an auger right here. I'm gonna walk out and show you just some of the work that I've been doing. My channel is named Hill Country Bucks and Farm Life. So today we're gonna be out here on the farm doing some work. Not sure if any of you guys are excavator guys or not, but there's only so much you can do with a bush hog and a tractor. Like you can tackle this field, and you can tackle the roads. You can also tackle some of the trails that go off of your roads. But what's nice about this excavator is, you know, it'll chew up tree limbs that are significantly higher than what you would be able to reach unless you were, you know, standing in the bucket and you had somebody lift you up to saw those off. But I'm excited about, you know, the excavator. It looked like this before I got started this morning, and I'm trying to make some of this brush back away from the roads a little. With the arm of this Yanmar SV40, which is just a, you know, 4-ton machine. It weighs about 9,500 pounds. You add some of the implements and it gets even heavier than that. But 39 horsepower Yanmar engine, and just about everybody has Yanmar engines these days, so I figured why not get a Yanmar. I looked at a Kubota 040-5, I believe. And this thing's got more power. Now I only got one set of auxiliary hydraulics, so I have to basically hold my thumb up while I got this diverter valve going to continuous flow. But this thing is a beast. 3.5 feet long. It's made by VMC, and they're out of Greenwood, South Carolina, I believe. But I'm gonna jump in this thing. I'll probably make some videos of me just having some conversations, but I had to put the Georgia Bulldog stickers on here, and I really like this color. My daughter goes to the University of Georgia. This was an add-on, another 500-pound counterweight. I'd recommend that on a machine this size. It's got a 4-way blade. It's got diesel, and you can look in here and see what there's a little bubble in there. You can see your levels, you know, when you're checking your levels in the mornings. I like the fact that all of your maintenance items, when it comes time to do maintenance, are very easy to get to. It's easy to check your oil in the mornings, fill your oil up. The filters, you know, you'd probably be able to get those off by hand without even having a wrench if they're not so tight. So now that we're in this thing, I'm gonna reach over here, turn it on. It's got AC, got a radio too, that came with it. I like this auto decel. Well, this is the travel alarm, so I'm gonna turn it off so you don't get that annoying beeping. This is auto decel, so if you turn it up, you know, full RPM and you don't do anything, I don't know if you could hear that or not, but it automatically rev the engine down. It's got an eco mode. I'm usually using this thing wide open when I got the VMC cutter on here. So this gets you going here so we can get things operating. I'll lift this blade up, and then I can going. But let me figure out a place to put this camera. I really like this mower. People might wonder why I got a brush cutter instead of a mulcher. Most of the stuff that I want to cut is generally going to be in that 5 or 6 inch range and lower, with the majority of it being vines and gallberries. We've got a lot of gallberries down here. But I didn't make any videos in January after the deer season was over. I had some video of that really good 7-point that I had right underneath me for probably about 10 minutes. I also drew a tag with a gun, and on the very first morning, literally, I think it was within a minute or two of legal shooting light, this really nice buck came in chasing a couple of does. And you know, I'm hunting out of a saddle and a one stick, and so the way I was hanging, I'm also a right-handed shooter. The way I was hanging, that buck kind of came over my right shoulder, which if I'm a right-handed shooter and I'm shooting like this and I'm hanging from a saddle, it's hard to get back here at 5 o'clock. So anyways, I watched that buck. I did get turned around. I got turned around pretty good, and I got the crossbow on him. What I did was got turned around, I ranged the buck at 30 yards, and as soon as I got 30 yards, he took off after those does again. So he actually ran away from me, so 30 yards was as close as he got. But he ran from 30 yards to probably about 120 yards, you know, down a hill through a creek bottom. So this is the big drainage. This is behind me. It's really, really steep right here. Just had a buck chase 2 does to about 30 yards right here. I could not swing around to get a shot, and he only stopped just briefly. I ranged 30 yards, and he was gone again. And he went down through this drain and up that hill. And I saw 3 or 4 more does. So hopefully he'll chase him back by here. I got some other stuff from that stand that I might be able to put up on the video. I saw some turkeys that day. I saw some pigs that day. And I saw those. I'm bouncing this thing all over the place. But it really mows this nice. You know, I still like making these mapping videos, and I don't plan to quit, but with the surgery that I had, and then, you know, with these fires the last 2 or 3 weeks, I just really hadn't had time. And at least with this new machine here, I just get out here and talk. If you don't mind me working, I'll put some of the you know, some of the mapping content over the top of this video as I talk. But you know, there's an absolute butt ton of guys out there that are pretty successful deer hunters, and a lot of them go about scouting and finding good spots different ways than I do. A lot of people put just a massive amount of boots on the ground until they eventually, you know, find a spot to hunt, and I'm more of a guy who likes to use LiDAR and mapping techniques, these shaded relief maps, and you know, they're really just high definition topo maps, and the LiDAR really gives you a better look at the lay of the land, because for me, I can visualize what the mountains look like. I can visualize what those hills look like. You can also do that when you go in the woods to do confirmation, you know, because you have to confirm everything. And even when you do confirm everything, you know, you might sit that spot until you've had enough of it, or you might sit that spot until you shoot a buck out of it. And sometimes, more often than not, you know, you're going to be sitting in a spot and not shoot a buck. You know, I got this really nice buck a few times on a few different cameras this past year, and it was very random. I'm going to try to expand that search when I can put my cameras back out on public land, which is, you know, not until September. Yeah, I'm obviously going to put some cameras in some of those spots that I hunted last year, because I had high confidence in those spots. But what I might do this year is expand the search a little bit to find some areas within, you know, a quarter of a mile or so of what I found last year, and just, you know, start building up more data, more experience with these spots, and eventually I might catch up to this deer before he dies, or, you know, somebody else might catch up to it because it is public land, so that's okay. And all the while you're trying to catch up with a buck, you know, as the seasons pass, you learn your spots a lot better than what you knew last year and even the year before that. These other bucks are getting older, so you can effectively hunt multiple, you know, decent age class deer in the area that you hunt. And a lot of the spots that you're finding that are really, really good, these rut funnels and places where bucks are bedding at, and, you know, the vegetation thickets. For these guys that live in rhododendron and mountain laurel country, and there's plenty of pockets of those. You know, a lot of times you can see pockets of mountain laurel on Google Earth. So those are real helpful too. You'll see a lot of my maps. I'll have the thickets marked, and you know, when you're mapping a thicket while walking around in the woods, you're also mapping deer sign and deer trails, right? So you're building your map. Just continue to map these spots until you learn them really well. And then if there's enough rubs and good scrapes that, you know, are within this, you know, half mile or quarter mile area, it just really depends on how big you want to expand your search, because, you know, obviously if you've got good sign in a lot of different areas, that allows you to get a leg up on hunting in spots with different winds. And no, you're not going to be successful every time out, but eventually you're going to catch up to a good buck. But the main thing with having multiple spots to hunt for different winds is so that you are always set up in the right spot when he does come by. And you know, for any bow hunter out there that's ever shot a decent buck and truly understood what happened, the first thing and the main thing that didn't happen was the buck didn't smell you, or he smelled you and he was too much into the rut to pay too much attention to it, which is rare, but it does happen. When I go into a new spot, and I think you've watched enough of, hopefully you've watched enough of my videos, but if you haven't, go check some of them out. I generally start with where a lot of things come together in hill country, and that's, you know, the tops of hills where a lot of ridges come into one place. You know, you can label those as 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, but how do the deer use them? They'll go from the tops of these hills over to the next top of the next hill. Some of these hilltops may be covered in thick brush, and some of them may be wide open, and obviously I think that the deer are going to try to bed where they've got some thick brush whenever it's available to them. That's not 100% of the time, because they will lay just underneath the top of the hill, and it's also dependent on how high the hill is. That upper 1/3 that gets used a lot by Dan Infalt and some of these guys, you know, it is true. Buck beds that I find are up high a lot of times, and sometimes they are down in the bottom is about a quarter of the way up from a thermal hub. So I like to check little points of ridges and things like that are close to thermal hubs, because there might not be but 100 foot or maybe not even 50 foot of elevation from the bottom to the top of the first little military crest, and I always like to check those. And if there's thick vegetation there, even better. And you know, when I study how to get from, you know, point A to point B, which would be a thermal hub to the top of a ridge, and then from a thermal hub, you know, back to the east to the top of the next ridge or topographic hub. You know, how do the deer travel through there? Because when I'm actually scouting, I'll go check out the steepest areas between those two routes, and that's usually where I'm finding most of the rubs, and that's generally not on the spine of the ridge. It's off to one side or the other, and most of the time there's a trail on both sides, one for one wind and one for another wind, and that way the wind is always, you know, coming over the top of the hill to the buck. But I've also shot a lot of deer that had the wind to their back. But with Cal Topo, you know, you can follow the steep areas, and I really like searching for those steep areas, because when I can find a trail on top of a steep area that leads me from a thermal hub down to, or up to a topographic hub, I can walk that edge, and the map tells me exactly where to walk. And so once I'm walking on the edge of the steep stuff, I'm documenting my rubs, my scrapes, and you do have to search for the scrapes near the spines of the ridge. So these trails off the edge of the spine of the ridge are just a means to travel and check the scrapes. But you know, these big community scrapes will have a little offshoot trail that'll go down to each trail that's on the side of the ridge, and the deer, the bucks can approach from downwind. That's the safest route anyways, and you'll get a lot of young bucks that come right up the middle of the ridge, and most of the does will do that, but the bigger bucks are gonna, I believe, are gonna try to have a wind advantage most of the time. I've generally shot my bucks with the wind to their back, chasing does. But I'm trying to think. Yeah, so 2 out of the last 4 big bucks that I've killed, 2 of them were with does and had the wind to their back. In that, you know, October the 1st to November the 15th time frame. I'm gonna stop this video for a second and change out the battery. Be right back. But I like to map the trails that have the most old sign and new sign. So that's the creme de la creme. If you really want to know, for me, is if I can find a couple of good community scrapes that I can connect over, you know, some distance. That distance is going to vary just due to the way the topography is, but 3 really good scrapes and a lot of older rubs and a lot of, you know, new rubs from last year. I'm going to find a few different ways to access that area, and I'm going to find hopefully a few different setups for different winds, and you know, I'm trying to make a good educated decision on where I can be, where I have, you know, a wind and a thermal advantage, and I expect the buck to come within bow range. So that's sometimes not where the sign is at, because you've still got to beat his nose, and I can guarantee you that I've been busted many more times than I have shot decent sized deer. You learn from it. When you get my age, it's more difficult to get back into some of these spots. It's also, you're trying not to waste, you know, your time. If you can get back into a spot, you want to feel like you got a pretty good chance of at least, you know, having an encounter. That's not always the case, but anything you can do to up your odds, I think it's time well spent. So that's why mapping for me is my journal. I'm continually updating my maps. Sometimes I'll go into a spot and I'll spend 4 hours in there mapping everything out, but I don't have confidence in it, and maybe that's just because there's not enough sign there to really get me excited when I compare it to another spot, say that I might hunt with a northeast wind or whatever. So I like to know that I have a lot of confidence in a spot when I go into it. And I only hunt a spot maybe 2 or 3 times before I believe it's kind of time to go spend some quality time in another spot, because you know, access is critical, but you're always leaving ground scent. And I've watched enough deer in my time to know that a deer may not completely bug out and leave, but I've definitely seen deer completely bug out and leave, and I try to avoid that. So after I've walked into a spot 2 or 3 times, most of the time I feel like it's time to go give that spot a break and go to another spot. Let's see what we can do to this oak. It's a young water oak, but this BMC cutter it's pretty powerful. I really like the pedals on this machine. I wear a size 10, and they fit my foot great. I'm just going to go down here to this next spot, but yeah, I'm looking forward to get back out in the woods when I get healed up.